to Transit Talk, a show brought to you by the DCTA, Denton County Transportation Authority, that highlights information about our public transportation. And as we always do, we have Christina Brevard, Marketing Director for the DCTA, as well as Jim Klein, President of the DCTA. So here is Transit Talk.
This is Christina Brevard with the Denton County Transportation Authority, and today I'm joined by Jim Klein, the President of DCTA. Good afternoon, Jim.
Greetings, Christina. How are you?
I'm doing great. We've been hearing a lot about what's going on in the government, the federal government, the local government, and transportation has many federal guidelines that we have to follow. And so when things are happening in the legislature, transportation within the Denton community is greatly affected. And I know that you've been heavily involved with keeping up with what's going on in the legislation. So why don't you share with our listeners a little bit about how transportation is affected and what we have going on?
Well, at the federal level, we have a number of things that impact us. And most notably, we have our agencies as ruled or governed by regulations from the Federal Transit Administration and the Federal Railroad Administration. Particularly the Federal Railroad Administration right now with the A-Train project is particularly of note because of the requirement for positive train control. And this is a safety measure that was mandated by the federal government as a safety measure resulting from an accident that occurred in California. This is something that, while it's certainly a really good thing, it's very expensive and it's a challenge for us to make it happen because of the technology. And so a couple of things that we're working with our elected representatives and staffers at the federal level really have to do with the timing of the implementation and how we can optimize that time and see if we can arrange to get some funding for this, because this is one thing that it's an unfunded mandate, meaning that it's a mandate from the federal government, but it is one that does not carry any funding that comes with it.
So it's currently not in our budget.
We've got part of it in there,
Okay.
and we're working our way through that, and we've gotten some help from the Council of Governments. We've also applied for a grant through the Tiger program. So we're working real hard to do the best we can to avoid having to borrow money to pay for this, which I think is important for the long-haul success of the agency.
Definitely.
There's a couple other things going on, if you'd, as we go through here. One is particularly when we talk about the Federal Transit Administration, and different from the Federal Railroad Administration, the transportation bill that's called MAP 21. It's a short-term bill. It's in place now, but next year it's going to be up for reauthorization. And so when we look at that, that's going to have a great deal of discussion about regulations that hit us, but particularly from the Federal Transit Administration side is a lot of the grants that we get that help us a great deal with both our preventive maintenance, buying new buses, keeping our fleet new, capital maintenance items for those different buses and the bus facility. In fact, we're with our new bus facility here in Denton, we're getting that was all 80% funded by the federal government. So it's certainly something that brings our gas tax dollars back to Texas. And so when we go for these grants, it's an important thing that we really do our very best to deliver the most we can for our riders and the citizens in our community around us, while at the same time maintaining the very best possible system we can.
Now, you mentioned that there's a reauthorization that's needed for MAP 21. What is that process like, and is it likely that it will be reauthorized, and if it's not, then what happens?
Well, what has typically happened is the different transit bill reauthorizations as they go through time used to be done fairly regularly on about a 6-year cycle. And what we've had in the past a couple of times is a great deal of gridlock in the Congress over how that's going to be done. And so what typically happens and just has been the norm, the new norm, has been a series of continuing resolutions and short-term measures that provide the funding we need, but don't give us the really long-term stability we hope for. Some of the agencies, now this is not DCTA, but some of the agencies that are getting grants for really long-term projects like light rail or commuter rail projects that are funded through the federal government, they really don't know when they're going to get the funding and aren't able to do as much planning as we'd like to do. And these projects take so long to bring about. I mean, we built the A-Train in 10 years, and that was light speed compared to what most agencies go through.
Right. Okay, great. Well, I think you shared a lot of really valuable information about what's going on in federal legislature. Is there anything else that you think that our listeners should be aware of?
Well, one of the things we're always keeping our eyes open for different things that can provide us unique opportunities, whether it's a grant, a change in the regulations, or somewhat, I hate to say this, but almost a defensive posture. How can we try to work with our legislators to make sure that if something was going to have a negative impact on DCTA or our funding, that we could make that happen? So.
Okay. And I guess our listeners, if they want to get more information and keep up to date on what is going on, the American Public Transportation Association is really a great publication that's available online. It's an organization that keeps up with what's going on with legislature, and they are great advocates for public transportation. Other than their website, is there any other particular websites or publications that people should be on the lookout for to get more information?
Well, I think the apta.com is something that's most helpful, and it's an agency and it's certainly an organization that we're a member of and we actively participate in. So they help us a great deal. So that's a great start, and I think you can go from there.
All right. Well, that's all we have for Transit Talk, all of your ins and outs to public transportation within the Denton community.
And there you have it, Transit Talk brought to you by the DCTA. A big thanks to Christina Brevard and Jim Klein. An extra big thanks to Gravity Feed for providing the intro and outro music. I'm Jake Laughlin, your host. Join us next time on Transit Talk, where we will be talking more transit. And in the meantime, go explore Denton.